Hi, I'm Darren Steele, and this is Ideation Thought Leadership. I am with Coach Dax Moy. I'm going to put Coach in front of Dax Moy. I don't know if you want me to do that. Let me say briefly that I recently completed your MindMap Mastery certification program, the neuroscience of transformational coaching. So that's one of many things that you do, and that's the way in which I've been most closely involved and worked with you over the last couple of years, as well as being in a shorter 30-day intensive group and following you for quite a number of years and participating in some of your posts and such on Facebook. Maybe you can tell myself and the listeners how you might sort of identify yourself within the scope of what it is you're most interested in doing now, and then we'll get into the where you've come from.
It's like, what are my professional pronouns? Um,
Yes,
it,
exactly.
like it's. I find it really difficult to really, as a bit tongue in cheek there, but you're talking about how hard it is to nail me down. I find it hard to nail myself down. Coach is one I'm very, very comfortable with. I'm definitely comfortable being a coach. It doesn't kind of bother me, if you want to put it that way. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I ultimately work in transformation, but that the form of transformation can take many different, or it can follow many different modalities and look very different for different people,
Yeah.
including for myself. So sometimes I'm an educator, sometimes I'm a mentor, sometimes I'm a an author, sometimes I'm a public speaker, sometimes I'm a trainer, and sometimes I'm a coach.
Yeah.
But all of it, like every aspect of how I show up in the world, or at least how I try to show up in the world, because no one's infallible, right? So, but every aspect of how I try to show up in the world is really about helping people to experience themselves as the version of themselves that they most want to meet. That's probably the best way of putting what I do, or what I feel my sense of purpose is around what I do. So, one of my big beliefs is, if you're very clear on what your purpose is, the modalities and methodologies can change as long as the principles don't constantly change, right? So, kind of, I have a set of principles that I approach, and a general philosophy that I use, and I'm quite happy to use whatever tool is in the toolbox to bring me to that.
It's a really interesting way of framing it. The fact that you mentioned purpose just makes me think. I was having this conversation with a client yesterday or the day before. We were talking about the difference between purpose, mission, vision, and sometimes words overlap, and people have an idea of what purpose and mission mean. And just for myself, how I think about it, I tend to think of mission more like my business or organization, and purpose as the personal, but they certainly overlap. Now, I remember this maybe 4 years ago. I wasn't. I'm not sure if this was the year before COVID, the January maybe of 2019, when you did your 30-day deep dive
Mm.
transformational program, and at the very end, the last exercise was developing your purpose, and you were pulling on all the things that we had learned. And I had written something, and I had then posted in the group forum, like, oh, I feel kind of let down. I didn't feel like this was a really, motivational purpose. And it just felt like, we're all this work and this is all I got. And you countered, it's like, wow, mate, this is pretty damn powerful to me. And after just a little bit of tweaking for the language, it's just when you freely love who you are, you can freely be all that you want. And as I sat with that the next day, and I'm thinking that that has been a consistent purpose for me for years, that's moved into what I might call my business purpose, empowering LGBTQ thought leaders and creators to become more skillful. There's that connection. But I love that you said, like, holding onto your purpose and then having the principles that may support that, and maybe even learning more principles. And I recognize that this aspect of love, happiness, joy, how that has influenced everything that I've been doing going forward. And that, just how you said that, kind of gave not so much more credence, but just made me realize something I hadn't quite realized.
Mm. Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in if you think of it as kind of like downstream, you talk about missions and visions and all of these kind of things, and they're all important. There's no argument from me that having those things in place isn't impactful and powerful. But certainly the way I think about it, the way I've kind of brought myself to think about this over the years, is that purpose is what ensures. It's kind of like your North Star. It's what ensures that no matter how many detours you take in life, no matter how many side paths and side journeys you take, you say, "Oh, right, but I'm still moving. I'm either still moving toward this, or if I wanted to adjust my course any day of my life, all I've got to do is face the North Star and kind of keep walking in that direction." So that for me, that's what purpose is. Purpose is the North Star. It's the big reason why you, at the very least, why you think you're here,
Yeah.
right? And when I say why you think you're here, like as in the best story you can tell yourself at any moment in time about what you want to exchange the currency of the days of your life for, right?
Lovely.
If
Yeah.
I'm going to spend the currency of the days of my life on something, what needs to happen in order for me to feel that exchange was fair and fruitful, right? I gave my days to this and I got this back in return. What needs to happen?
That's a really simple, elegant way of explaining it. And I remember when, if it wasn't from that program, it was something I learned within MindMap Mastery. You tend to take the complex or around these ideas of purpose or mission, where maybe somebody else that's teaching it tries to make it seem so complicated. So you take the complicated and you make it very simple, and this is what I've really appreciated about your teachings and the way in which you present the material. It's very human in the sense of it's very down to earth. And it isn't about just me in the sense of individual, but it goes back to what you said as your purpose, helping the individual fully and freely express, themselves in the best way that they can. And if we get too caught up in what's complicated, well, we're just going to remain in the what's complicated and never get into what kind of change we'd like to have happen for
Right.
ourselves.
And I think that's one of the big challenges. Basically, most transformational challenges, and which means that most experiential challenges, which means most identity challenges that any of us experience, and we all experience all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Most challenges come from our use of language, so they're linguistic problems. We use very general and vague words to try to describe something very, very specific and personal that's happening within us and around us.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of in using those generalities, we stay vague, and so we try to fill in the gaps with complexity. Right? We don't try to fill in the gaps with complexity. We fill in the gaps and make them complex.
Yes.
Instead of saying, let me really try and narrow down the linguistics. Let me really get the term that people in linguistics and behavioral psychology use is granular, right? It's granularity of language. Kind of as you think about grains of sand on the beach. If we can bring words down from kind of big, wide, all-encompassing concepts to no, what I really mean is this. So an example that I gave in a podcast I was on earlier this week was, very often we'll throw away a word like love. And we'll say, kind of, it's all about love for me. And I go, great, okay. But then you'll hear that same person use like, oh, I really love my work. I really love my wife. I really love my children. I really love chocolate. I really like. So you've used the same word. So if you were to line those people up in a line, we were coming to the end of the world and you were allowed to grab two things that you love, what would you grab? It probably wouldn't be chocolate, and it probably wouldn't be your career, right? Right? I mean, maybe for some people, I don't know, but kind of it probably wouldn't be those things, because you'd say, that's ridiculous. I don't mean that. So if you don't mean it, then try to get to the bottom of what you really mean when you use a word for something, right? And now, as we start to do that, we get more granular. As we get more granular, we get simpler. Life becomes more simple because we don't use one word to describe a whole host of thousands of possibilities. We use one word to describe one thing. And then we say, and when I say this word, I mean this. And when I say this word, I mean this. And I think that's where a lot of my simplicity comes from, is because I personally have, I get frustrated at not really understanding what people mean when they say something.
Mm.
Um, and so, and I also get frustrated myself when I'm trying to share something with someone and it's not coming out. My brain knows what wants to be expressed, and then it's saying all this kind of what I call bullshit in the middle, right? It just
Right.
starts confounding and conflating words and meanings and stuff. And I go, why the hell am I saying it that way? It doesn't make sense to even to me anymore.
Yeah.
And people's brains operate better on simple concepts than on complex ones.
Yeah. Well, there's something there as well about alignment. So throughout what you've taught me over the years and in MindMap Mastery, you talk about emotional alignment. I think this is so relevant when it comes to our thoughts and our words as well. And I've even many years before I was introduced to you and started following your stuff. I mean, coming from having studied German language and linguistics at university and going through to the master's level, my geek out was like not just pure linguistic theory, but understanding the words, the way in which sentences were constructed. I remember talk about geek out at the master's level, doing an essay about a German novella about the use of a particular kind of verb structure, because all the verbs were ending verbs, like something was moving towards death, something was moving towards decay. And usually it was some sort of a prefix at the beginning of the word. And so I was, going through the text, but that's the granularity as an example of going through this text to create a greater sense of meaning, a greater sense of feeling of what that author was trying to express, but then an understanding sometimes where our words come from etymologically, historically. It doesn't mean the word means that today, but it certainly has a resonance. We sometimes have to go out broad before we can come back in to go granular. And this is something that sometimes is so problematic when people start to say, well, this word can mean this. And it's like, well, we have to be kind of careful. The light example is saying love for everything. The more problematic example is in, let's say, if we get into politics, and we don't have to go into that exactly here, but when people start to throw around words without care, then we can get into some really great trouble.
Yeah, and so the the key here, like regardless of where, like I'm a big etymologist. I love etymology. It informs a lot of, and as you quite rightly said, things do change etymologically over time, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we start to use, thing like that's cool. We don't necessarily mean it's cold, right? Right, and that's wicked. It doesn't necessarily mean it's evil, right? So we
Right,
do
right.
change uses of things, but one of the things that you do learn from a good grounding in etymology is how, and this is the key word here, how intentional the use of the word used to be.
Mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm,
meant this, and I think one of the challenges I see as a coach and just generally as a human being is a
mm-hmm.
lot of people have lost their intentionality or lost the skill of intentionality. That kind of, and that's where we end up with so many combative and conflicting um, forms of
Mm-hmm.
communication, because we know what we mean. We expect them to know what we mean because we're of the same era, you might say. And if I'm saying a word, surely you should be translating it the way that I do. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
not how we work. Our social influences are kind of, every aspect of becoming who we are now has informed our choice of words,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we're working intentionally with someone over time, we really do have to start thinking about, are we both using the same, we both may be English speaking,
Mm.
and we both may have even grown up in the same city, right? In the same country, in the same city, in the same era, and
Mm-hmm.
yet we may still be miscommunicating because we mean different things when we use the word, or
Yeah.
how we put those words together. So it's kind of like when you communicate with someone, it's kind of like learning a new language.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I best describe that then, this importance of understanding our own use of words and granularity, is that if I have to teach you my language, I have to know it damn well myself. I have to sit down and say, what do I mean when I say this?
Yeah.
so that not so much so that you don't get offended. Like, it's not my job to make sure that you don't get offended or whatever, so that you don't get confused. Or in another way of putting it is so that we can get the best possible communication
Yeah.
when we are communicating. Right, even the word communication etymologically means to become one with.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm trying to become one with you during this conversation, it's really helpful to know what you mean when you say something, to know what I mean when I say something, and to know what are the similarities and what are the differences.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it's like learning a language is because like English-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, Spanish-speaking countries, German-speaking countries, they all use a different word when they might say the word window.
Right.
Right? But we all mean the same thing, but we use a different word to say it. So, it makes sense then. Like, you don't go into another country and expect them all to know what you mean by "could you open the window, please?" You'd maybe make some effort to learning the language.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a lot of sense to learn the language of the people around us. But in order to learn the languages of those people, I think we're in a stronger position if we learn our own language and then we share that.
You mentioned intention, and there's this idea I actually, I'll give an example, but I actually don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something from a neuroscience perspective on intention. So often you'll read about people saying, well, this person said that, intention doesn't matter, of which I completely disagree, because I think what you've talked about here is, if there's going to be this communing, then intention does matter, because we can make mistakes, in quotation marks, if what I say you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it doesn't mean necessarily that I'm wrong. It just means I might have to, let me help you understand what I am intending. So from a neuroscience perspective, this is just a question that came to mind. Do you have any research or knowledge on how intentionality shows up with respect to how we feel, our emotions, and what that then makes us think and say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a massive. It seems like such a small question, but it's a massive area. It's a massive field, right? If I can do a Dax Moy simplification on it,
Yeah.
Intentionality is we transmit our intention not just verbally and by our choice of words, but we transmit it by every other aspect of how we use the environment, including our physical environment, like the physical environment around me right now, but also the physical environment of me. Like, how am I posturing? What are my facial expressions? How am I gesticulating? Like, all of these kind of things all go in toward transmitting attention, right? Mm-hmm. If I say, "I love you," right, and I've got a mean face and tense body part, like, the words don't go with the physicality, right? And it's so important to understand that intention is the sum total of yourself in the environment, how you use the environment, and how you use the physicality of you personally as a part of the environment. It's all of it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are just trying to rely on words. This is why written communications, are particularly like Facebook posts and all this kind of stuff, they get misconstrued all the time. And people that aren't necessarily your enemy are seen as somebody worthy of full destruction, right? We dehumanize them and we say, how dare they say that? Particularly if it's an area that you might feel strongly about, politics, gender, religion, any number of things, right? You read something, you say, that disgusting Nazi, how dare they say this about that may not have been their intention, but when you're only translating solely off of words, mm-hmm. and you're translating on your meaning for those words, right? And like, in my community, in my culture, in my kind of in-group, we've banned the use of those words. We don't use those words anymore. Right, this person over here doesn't necessarily know that. They haven't even been introduced, or they may be from a generation where those words were just the word. I'm not sticking up for any. I'm not saying any words are particularly good or particularly bad, right? I don't really care about that from that perspective. What I'm more interested in is the use of words as a skill set.
Mm-hmm.
and we have to teach each other what's skillful use of words. And the key word there is each other, or the key part of that is each other. Like, it's
Each
not
other.
for you to tell me that there are words that I can't use within the gay community, for example, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not for you to tell me that. It's for you to invite me to a better set of skills. It's not for me to say, well, I've always used that word, so I'm going to stick with it. It's
Yeah.
for us, if we're really going to communicate, if we're really going to become one with, it's not you demanding that I become one with you or you become one with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's us saying, oh, we really want to communicate skillfully. So we move toward each other and we say, this is a better way of us doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that, I know we don't want to get off into kind of like, kind of extreme communications and stuff during
Mm-hmm.
this call. But, it's one of the problems that I really do see is that there's always a group demanding that they become one with means you step toward me or
Mm-hmm.
I step toward you, right? Versus, no, we're going to meet here, like, to use that cliche, meet in the middle. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean selling out on anything that's important to you, but it means you stop demanding that someone has to agree by your definitions of everything.
Yeah. It's the very challenging proposition of two simple words finding common ground.
Right, right, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
people have done it all down through the ages. But here's the thing: like, it's words that start wars. It's words that end them. We very few people, you know, just surprise attack people and like there was no form of communication prior. We just like invaded a country without Ukraine's going on like, but that's still off the back of words.
Yes.
And when it finally does come to its conclusion, it will be off the back of words.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And kind of people will eventually go, okay, we're going to meet in the middle. That's how it always ends up. That's you know
I mean, there will be whatever happens. There will be study after study, and I mean, it's already being talked about right now without going fully into this discussion. But when you watch the speeches on video delivered by the president of the Ukraine, you see a completely different set of intention, of emotion, of a will. I believe when I watch him, his willingness to want to communicate and to make connection.
mm-hmm.
I feel and sense no deception. I just feel this honest, call it pride, and a willingness to put it all on the line, and not to diminish what's going on, but there is something to be said for holding that space of like video communication in this day and age where everything is too short and taking that time to try and express.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Otherwise, people don't feel it.
We've come full circle. So transmission of intention
Yeah.
is really what sponsors effective communication.
Yeah.
Without intention, we're operating binary. We're just transmitting kind of ones and zeros,
Yeah.
and humans don't respond very very well to that.
Yeah.
So we need to feel that, okay, you want this, and here's why you think you're entitled to it, and here's why you've taken some of the steps you've taken. Like, it's the storyteller part of the brain, and it's that part of the brain that's really really interested in creating the best possible prediction and response. Right, that's what the brain comes back to. It's a pattern recognition machine. It uses those patterns to create predictions. It uses the predictions to create responses. It uses those responses to create outcomes. Right, boom, boom, boom. It's constantly doing this, as you know full well from the program. And
Yeah.
if we don't kind of layer the story full of intention and meaning for what's going on, then it becomes very difficult for the brain to predict.
Yeah. One of the key things that I learned, and it was repeated throughout the MindMap Mastery, is this aspect of our emotions and our feelings. And, I've done some research recently a little bit more into what action programs are, and then the basic drives we have, like thirst or hunger. And you taught all of that in different ways to bring perspective to how I would work as a coach. So I'm interested in if we could have a discussion a little bit more about emotions, feelings, and connecting to our actions and decision making. Because one of the biggest benefits I've seen since uh, better mastering the skills I've learned and then finally getting my diploma in this program is when I work with clients. And I wanted to say drilling down, but I'm not drilling down with them because that sounds like I'm pressuring them in some way. But it's really listening, asking the question, getting to, in some cases, like what we just talked about, greater clarity about the words they're using and what they say. And I, just to end this thought, I joked with you yesterday preparing for this. I've recently been making more of my clients cry. And I'm like, oh, yeah, here we go again. And it's not anything to be quote unquote proud of or anything, but it's this moment where the client gets so in touch with either a really deep emotional drive or need that they either haven't been paying attention to, or they've been unconscious about, or they've just been too distracted and too busy. So I wonder if we can talk about what's maybe missing in your eyes that you see overall.
Well, I mean, look, I think the first thing is to understand the distinction between emotions and feelings. They're often used interchangeably, and we think we're talking about the same thing, and we're really not. So,
Yeah.
emotions are sensory driven. They're not a thought process. Like, obviously, your brain does some calculation on it, but they're not a thought process. They're not cognitive and conscious, you could say. So your emotions are going to come from how your sensory system is perceiving the world at that moment in time. Okay, so and when we're talking about your sensory system, we are talking about all of the senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, balance, and all of the other senses that hardly ever get talking about, like the sub senses, like mechanoreceptors in your joints, like thermoreceptors, chemoreceptors, like all of these receptors in your body that are constantly doing a reading of its environment and saying, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And this is the sponsoring question of the brain. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And this partly explains why you can walk into an environment and you can know that an argument just took place there, even though the two people might give you smiles, right? But part of your sensory system picks up that the smile is a bit of a plastic smile, that there's a bit of an edge to the person's voice, that there's kind of your from a kind of olfactory perspective, from smell, your sense, even though you may not smell fear in the air, specifically, we're still endowed with all the same olfactory senses that we were thousands of years ago when we lived in the wild, when we were kind of cavemen. So we still have all of that sensory system going on, going, okay, I'm picking up stress hormones in the air and all of this kind of stuff. So why we can pick that up is because the sensory system is doing its job all the time. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? It's why when you walk into a bar and then you'll sit down and there's nothing particularly untoward going on. There's no one throwing punches or anything else, but you go, I'm not feeling comfortable here tonight. I think, can we move on to somewhere else? Can we go to a different? I've had that in places, and then later on, I found out, a friend who stayed there has said, "Oh, you left at the right time. A massive fight kicked off after you were there, and somebody got stabbed or whatever, right?" And you go, "Wow, like that was the sensory system picking up on that." That's what emotions are. Emotions are the totality of your sensory system giving you signals to create non-cognitive action, like do something about this. I'm going to make you not. Now I'll use the other word. I'll make you not feel right, but feeling is a different thing. But I'll make you aware that something is not right in the environment. Or the flip side, right? Because we often think of it like negative. I'll also make you aware that there's an opportunity in this environment, right? All of the same things. Like you can, from the olfactory perspective, you can be picking up on positive and happy hormones coming out of a person. You can't even see their face; their back is toward you, but you're getting good vibes off them, right? Yeah. And you naturally want to move to, or they might be punching out serotonin and oxytocin into the air right now, and kind of your olfactory system is picking up on that. That's emotion. That is non-cognitive reading of your environment to make you aware of threats or make you aware of opportunities.
And just to interject here, what's so interesting about that is that we forget that is so much a part of the animal that we
Right.
still are.
Right, right. And we'll often throw out the phrase gut feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you why, but I knew
Mm-hmm.
I had to get out of there. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
tell you why, but I knew I was in the wrong place. I couldn't tell you why, but I knew I had to go and approach that guy and kind of start a conversation. I've got no rhyme or reason to it. I just knew it was the right thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, your brain had a rhyme and reason to it. You're just not aware because, this is exactly how emotions should work. Our cognitive processes are slow and clunky and clumsy, and if
Mm-hmm.
we allow ourselves to stay with cognition for too long, we can talk ourselves out of opportunities, or
Yeah.
we can talk ourselves out of dangers. We can go, I'm probably just making some shit up here, right? It's not real. I don't need to do anything about this. And then later on, you go, I knew I should have trusted my gut.
Yeah.
So we throw it around like gut feelings, but gut feelings are basically our emotions. They're kicking in. Feelings are when we get cognitive, we engage cognitive processes, often, although not exclusively, but often around our emotions. So an emotion might trigger something, and we let a thought process get into it, or we
Mm-hmm.
might be thinking stuff, and that thinking stuff builds up enough power and enough impetus that we feel something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
the problem with it coming from that direction is that it's not always true. We kind of engineered a story about danger, a story about opportunity, a story about not being good enough, because we are scanning our environment and looking for cues and creating ideas and ideals about what should be happening, and then we tell ourselves a story about it. That's a cognitive process, though. But both have their place and both are valuable, but they're distinctly different.
Yeah.
And particularly with feelings, we have to have reality checks on them.
Yeah.
I'm kind of here's what I'm feeling about something. Hold on, is that true? And where am I getting my data on this from? And where am I taking my cues from? You know, very often people's sense of feelings about their self-worth, for example, will come from someone that they trusted,
Yeah.
perhaps still trust, but certainly someone that they trusted, particularly in their formative years,
Yeah.
telling them about good and bad, right and wrong, morality of certain behaviors and not of others, and all this kind of stuff that they then carry forward, and then they read every situation through the eyes of that person and say, I'm a
Mm.
bad person, I'm never going to amount to anything, I'm not good enough, I'm not something enough, right? I'm simply not enough, right? But so we'll often create feelings based upon prior experiences through the lenses and eyes of other people, and so that's where we have to be. I was about to say careful. Careful is the wrong word. We have to be intentional and honest in our appraisals of our feelings. Like,
Yeah.
where is this coming from? Is this my thought, or is this the thought that mum and dad gave me 20 years ago that
Yeah.
I'm still kind of carrying and using as a framework for judging what's going on here?
I think there's I'm thinking of an example of somebody I was working with, and they were upset with what someone had said or how someone had treated them. And, I love this question, and I've used it when it's appropriate, exactly that you said, how do you know that feeling is true? Or what's true about that feeling? Because you're dealing with that surface level, for lack of better words, just let's say that's the most powerful feeling in the moment that the person is experiencing. And that is the only thing they're focusing on at the expense of going deeper, so to speak. And it just shocks them for a moment. Like, what do you mean? Is that feeling true? It's like, well, and after a few more questions, digging into it and then getting to the root of other things and realizing, usually the client realizing it is some probably unmet emotional need, not feeling. And like you've said, they've then gotten stuck on the story, the narrative, the feelings, the cognitive reflections or observations of absent or present emotions.
Right.
And that has got them trapped. That has made them defensive. That has made them feel sad. And yeah, like the distinction between, going back to the granularity of language, knowing what emotions are, knowing what feelings are. And it's such a great moment of self-awareness, but also humility when someone really sees, oh, I can keep telling myself this story and thus associate this feeling, or I can figure out what need of mine, prediction and response, is not being met.
Mm-hmm.
And then I, and only I, can decide how to handle that. And it might be that they need to have a conversation with that person, or it may be they just need to come to peace with whatever emotional need is not being met and then move on.
Right. A poorly translated and defined feeling will always lead you to problems.
Yeah.
And it will always bring you back in. See, here's another distinction between feelings and emotions. Emotions pretty much always cause us to act in some way, shape, or form, right? Because that's what they're intended to do. An emotion is intended to facilitate and expedite action.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you feel this way, or sorry, you have this emotion, right? So this emotion, do this.
Yeah.
And it might be fight, flight, freeze, kind of. It could be any number of the kind of the common behaviors associated with the emotion, right? Take the opportunity, move in, move away, run away, fight, or whatever, right? The trouble with feelings is that very often we can get trapped in trying to analyze and justify and rationalize, which means that there's no commensurate action that goes with them. You feel a certain thing, whereas a behavior will normally have an outlet, even rage, right? Because a lot of people kind of see things like the rage family of emotions, which goes rage, anger, frustration, and so on. That's all one family, right? So kind of people have gotten in the habit of thinking that that's a bad emotion to have. All of our emotions they have a purpose. So there's no such thing as a bad emotion. But there's kind of bad use of an emotion, if you will, or unskillful, I'd prefer to use, unskillful use of an emotion. But unskillful use of an emotion only really kicks in when we translate feeling onto it and we start to try and analyze it and push, right? If we actually just behave the way the emotion wants us to, that even the outburst or whatever it's going to be is going to be kind of fairly small. It'll be over and done with quite quickly, because the aim is to get you to move, take action right now, boom, and then the event is gone. The event that triggered that, and that's the whole point of an emotion. There's an event that triggers it. It causes you to act, which means you're no longer in the presence of the stimulus, or the stimulus is no longer in the presence of you.
Yeah.
Feelings, we can sit with feelings for years, decades, lifetimes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where most people, to use an extremely technical phrase here, most people get fucked up. Right. That's where it happens, because you'll sit for decades, you'll sit for entire lifetimes in your feelings and do nothing with them. They don't cause you to act or move or change or anything. Yeah. Either you don't leave the environment that caused them, or you don't change the environment that caused them. And so you just continue to feel them and then feel some way about them.
Right. I guess to go from simple to complex, and for the complex, a question for you. We can feel hungry, but feeling is the observation of the action program that's like, oh, I have hunger or I have thirst coming up, and we can create feelings about what we might like to eat and whether we're going to enjoy the process or whether there are other issues around it. But with what you've said, how does this may not apply overall, but how does this apply to somebody that has clinical depression with respect to their emotions and their feelings, and the challenge of stories that they might continually be working through that make it very difficult for them to move out of the way that they're feeling? And is that the right word?
So depression really finds its roots in, it's going to sound strange when I say it, but it finds its roots in apathy.
Okay.
Right. So it's pretty difficult to experience what most of us call depression without apathy. And apathy finds its roots in helplessness and hopelessness. Right. And that really finds its roots in mostly in suppression of what we're feeling and what we're emoting. Right. So you you can't really suppress an emotion in the way most of us think about it. You have it, but you may not act upon it, because you translate very quickly into feelings, and then you tell yourself something about what you can or can't, should or shouldn't, must or mustn't do. So one of the ways I always describe to my clients is that suppression or repression always eventually leads to depression. And the reason it does that is because it creates a sense of hopelessness. Fuck it, nothing I do or say here is going to make any difference. Nothing's going to change for me. Or you go down the route in the storytelling of of telling yourself fatalistic stories. Damn, like I did it years ago with my PTSD had already started, so kind of PTSD from the tsunami came in on my life and all that kind of stuff, right? And then I got hit by a massive post-dated tax bill. They said, oh, just suddenly overnight 400k we want you to pay back on top of this year's tax bill, right? And I was like, crap. And then that means that will deplete my bank accounts. And if that depletes my bank accounts, my brain started doing how are you going to pay the mortgage? Can't pay the mortgage. Where are you going to live? If you don't live there, then you have to do and the brain kind of moved into this really fatalistic cascade of thought. And I caught myself in it, but I was like, this is what happens to people all the time. If then, right? And we end up in this kind of helplessness, hopelessness kind of situation. And one of the ways that we deal with helplessness and hopelessness is to stop acting. And that's what you see in depression. Depression is largely apathetic. It doesn't mean those people don't get up every day and go to work. I'm talking about apathy as an internal state, not as an external one. They can look busy and they can be on the go and they can be cleaning. They're not like all slobs that lay around on the sofa all day and kind of never do any laundry or anything like that. That's not what I mean by apathy. But there's an apathetic aspect of I guess you could call it unskillful acceptance, because acceptance can be skillful, but it's unskillful acceptance. It's accepting things that aren't necessarily true, but behaving like they are. That's apathy, because it's saying and based upon what I know, nothing can change here, so I'm kind of stuck with this crap. And that's just the way he or she is, and they're never going to change. Mm-hmm. But I also can't leave him or her because of blah, blah, blah. So I have to stay in this crappy relationship and put up with it for the rest of my days. It's apathy. And suppression always leads to depression.
So you mentioned the PTSD. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit of your journey, perhaps what brought you to that point. And then I think that's when, I'm not sure if it was before or around that time, that you started to try and figure out, how can I help myself? And then you discovered more about neuroscience. And then you turned out to be, in my opinion, one of the most proficient teachers of how to use neuroscience within a coaching framework, but in an even more simplistic way of saying it, of living a fully self-aware life.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because before I worked very heavily in neuroscience already, right? I was as a personal trainer, I was a rehab specialist. I got people out of wheelchairs that doctors said they'd never stand again, they'd never walk. I got people post-stroke using their limbs again. Neuroscience was a big and important part of it, but I always really used it mostly for the physical. Like I'd tweak the nervous system and get it to do things. The way we described it was like rewiring, but we were using new neural pathways to do what the old neural pathways kind of could no longer do because of the strokes or because of the conditions that people had. And so I was very successful down that route through the rehabilitative perspective. And I was also what you could say a more general personal trainer as well. So I'd help people with their fat loss journeys and all that kind of stuff. And I was an author, and I'd been really successful with my book, The Magic 100, which was all about goal achievement. I was a goals guy, all right, and it was, for me, the equation was very, very simple, and it still is within a specific framework, right? And this was really simple. Know what you want, know why you want it, know what the price is, get up and pay the damn price, go and do it, right? And that's it. Which kind of translated to, if you want something badly enough, you'll get it. Which kind of translated to latterly kind of realizing that I spent a big part of my early career judging people for not wanting things badly enough and not taking enough action. And, that's how it was. Because I'd always been a go-getter. I joined the Airborne and the Commando Forces in Britain. I'd kind of worked in a special operations kind of role as well. Pretty much everything with really hard work, everything I kind of wanted to happen kind of happened for me, right? It wasn't that I passed everything first time. I struggled. I had injuries, but everything I kind of wanted to happen happened. So I had proof positive that if you want something badly enough, you'll get it. And most people were kind of too lazy to see the journey through.
And just as an
And
interjection there, what it sounds to me, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I've heard so many people say this, they write this, and I just want to bitch slap them. It's like, if I can do it, so can you.
yeah, yeah, and but yeah, kind of that was the place I was coming from, because I came from really humble beginnings, and kind of I'd made something really decent of my life. I'd gone from being completely unknown to in all of the UK and even international press and papers and
Mm-hmm.
TV and radio, all kinds of stuff. And I was making the kind of money that I thought I'd never make. And I wrote a book about it, and that became a bestseller almost overnight. And I really believed it. I wasn't bullshitting anybody. That's what I believe. Want it badly enough, get up, do it, take the action. Cool. And then one day I met myself as a person who couldn't do that, because I'd been in the tsunami with my family. I'd spent hours out in the water carrying bodies and doing very high level first aid on people, like as in holding limbs together and guts in and all this kind of stuff. It was very graphic. And I got through that fine at the time. I wouldn't say it didn't bother me. I was shook up at the end of that day, but I guess the soldier in me just came in, and I did what I was trained to do and got on with things. I came back to the UK, and the following year my brother died, and he died in quite a kind of like horrific way, or how I found him was fairly horrific. He died of he'd ingested, he got sick, basically vomited during an epileptic fit. And I found him like 2 weeks later in his apartment. It was the middle of winter, so all the radiators were on. So he was like a blackened zombie that was decomposing and all kinds of stuff. That's how I found my brother. So both of those things happened within about the space of a year. And heartbroken at the time, but still got on with life. And I was really busy at work. And then about 7 years later, I was driving home. Work had been really stressful, and some things that were going. Everything that had been going quite well was going a bit kind of strange. And I was kind of stressed, and then the stress just opened the floodgates, and PTSD found me. I saw bodies landing on my car. I started having flashbacks and visions and waking up in the night. I went for a year and a half with just about 2 or 3 hours sleep per week, like literally per week. I was it was insane. And yeah, so kind of all the things that the wanting it badly enough and the taking action and set all your goals out and all that kind of stuff, it just didn't work for me anymore. And I spoke to coaches, I spoke to therapists, kind of nothing was working. And I'd traveled the world. I'd spoke to like religious kind of gurus. I'd had Hopi medicine men dancing over me with drums and smoke kind of in Sedona. I'd done crystal heat, like literally everything. Like, so I went through everything. Some things helped better than others, but nothing really helped. And then I just had the epiphany, I guess, that it was kind of go back to the neuroscience. Like I think it came from a frustration. Why the fuck is none of this working? Like, and what's going on in this damn brain of mine? And then that was like, hold on, what is going on in this damn brain of mine? And then I went and leaned into the neuroscience of behavior again, started to break down the very complex ideas that I found out there. And a lot of them were very unusable. They weren't malleable. Like, there was data on the brain, but that kind of didn't tell you anything. They got like all these topographical mapping and kind of all these studies and all, I'm sure since you've been doing this more from a neuroscience perspective, you've read through, and some of them you read a paper and you get to the end of it and you go, so what? I mean, I read literally thousands of papers, and I read all the leading books, and some books were better than others. But I read, but piece by piece, I started to put together, it really comes down to the brain will function in a certain way in the presence of these stimulus and not in the presence of those. And it's almost got like a switching system that says, if threats around, shut down cognition and desire and want and dreams and visions and goals and all that kind of stuff, and take care of the threat, right? And then it was a bit more of an in-depth dive into, okay, so what does the brain perceive as threat and why? And and we've got all the kind of the obvious stuff like kind of lions and tigers and bears, oh my, but this storyline that basically, which whittled down to in MindMap eventually, to let's forget what the threat itself might manifest as, but really what it is a lack of prediction and response, and the brain is seeking that. Give the brain prediction and response about something, and it lowers its threat signals. If it lowers its threat signals enough, and you can bring survive drives down, then the thrive drives start to go up, and now you get access to the parts of your brain that create futures and have dreams and want big things and want the best for the world, and so it's kind of that's the way MindMap came about, and that's the way my kind of embracing of neuroscience in a very practical way came about, because I really wanted to know what the hell was going on in my brain. And kind of it's a bit like the the kind of the alcoholic that gives up booze and tries to persuade everyone that it was the best thing in their life, or the smoker that gives up smoking, or whatever it is. And it kind of wants it's not so much I gave up goal seeking. I still have plenty of goals. I have goal lists and all the rest of it. I'm just a lot more aware now that the ability to stay on track with them is really dependent upon what my brain is feeding on at any moment in time, and how it's perceiving its environment. And so when I still have dark days, I still have kind of areas where I'm too passive and I'm not really taking action on the things that I said were important for me. But now those are invitations for me to say, what am I perceiving as threat that maybe I'm not addressing at the moment? And so it's definitely been a game changer for me, for the clients I work with, for the thousands of coaches that I've taken through the various programs. It was quite a wake up call to see yourself one day as the goals guy, and suddenly who can't even motivate himself to get out of bed. So
It's also interesting to me, having done near 15 years in, personal training, fitness coaching, nutrition coaching, and all of that. And I think that was what opened me up to this idea of coaching. And then I studied for it was a 365-day program, and there was something to do every single day with precision nutrition that was founded by John Berardi. And that was maybe about 75% different coaching modalities and 25% nutrition, because there was a level one before that. That was all the technical nutrition stuff. I think there is this aspect of having worked with people's bodies and movement, and then their perceptions of what they want, what they believe they can and cannot do. And, in that you came from that world, and you've had a lot of clients go through your program that were also, PTs or therapists. I don't know, because I wasn't not a personal trainer, but in some ways I feel that having had that experience has made my internalizing and understanding of the neuroscience around transformational coaching even more profound. Because at least for myself, I really developed in my personal training a very keen internal sense, interoception. Like case in point, I'll go get a massage. I haven't had one in such a long time. And I describe, and the person's like, I've never had a client describe exactly what's going on in their body. Like he was like, well, it's internalized self-awareness. Doesn't everyone have it? It's like, no. But there's something fascinating about knowing how it's not just our minds, but it's everything about us. And if you get a sense, whatever that sense may be, of something physically being off, is it like that you have a sore back, or is it the way in which you're actually thinking? And that I've found very helpful as well in some of the work that I've done with clients. And I don't know if that's something that's continued with you, or what your observations are on that.
Yeah, and I think, see, on the one hand, even if we lean into the more, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but it's how coaching evolved originally. It evolved from kind of like pop psychology, right? Which is why most of us, when we first got into coaching, we were all talking about people thinking positive thoughts and not not holding on to their negative emotions and thoughts and all like it's pop psychology kind of stuff. And we all started there. So anybody who says they didn't, they're bullshitting. And you know,
because it's not that long ago.
Yeah. But there's still a lot of that around. There's still a lot of coaching is still pop psychology led in many respects, and it's about kind of taking action, getting up and going, hustle, and work through it, and you're like, or if you want it badly enough, right? It's all still there, and so I think one of the things that has really come to me and really been helpful over the years is when I meet myself as the person who's not, instead of just putting it down to it's how you're thinking, which is undoubtedly true. There's a part, it's in large part how you're thinking, but I'm more interested in, and the question that comes to me each time is, which part of my brain am I thinking with? Right? It's the biggest realization. It's going upstream another layer, right? Because what you're thinking is just what you're thinking. It's like, and you're going to think a certain way if you're in a certain area of your brain, right? If you are just as if you're sexually aroused, then your intentionality is completely different, and what you're thinking about is going to be very different to if you're experiencing fear because someone just kicked in the door to your apartment and they're standing there with a gun, right? Like what you're thinking is going to be relative to the part of the brain that has been activated for the thinking. And I think that's what pop psychology tends to miss, which is just like, it's almost like you can overwrite that. Like, I know you're thinking a bad thought a minute ago, let that bad thought go, think something positive. And I think, coming back to the point you made about being a personal trainer first, I think there are times when I like to think it's about the body, and because I've worked with the body, and it may be true, I'm not certain. But sometimes I think what made me a really good coach was really having enough conversations with people in different states, right? And that I saw people hesitant, reluctant, and fearful. And it wasn't a physical fear when they'd first start with me. It was like I don't want to make an idiot of myself. I don't want to look stupid in the gym. I don't want to be the fattest, the thinnest, the tallest, the skinniest, the weakest, right? So it was a very social fear. And I saw a lot of social fear in clients. I also saw a lot of people in physical fear when you give them an exercise. I saw people not being able to physically control the dumbbells or the barbell and stuff. And then I saw them growing into, no, if you stay with a pattern long enough, it will emerge and you'll start to own it. I saw people kind of see themselves make improvement. I also saw people see themselves make what I used to call back in the days excuses, right? Kind of they like and hear themselves. I watched the patterns of justifying and rationalizing the excuse layers, right? Oh yeah, I couldn't make it tonight because I've got to cancel tonight's session because the boss has kept me late at work, right? And then it'll be like, what if they keep you late at work tomorrow night and the night after that and the night after that, right? What's your program and your pattern? And you'd hear some people entrench, other people kind of go, oh yeah, I didn't really think about it that way. Oh, maybe I should start carrying my kit in the back of the car, or right? And so I think a big part of being an actual physical coach, like being a personal trainer, it may be like watching the physical bodies at work. I'm certainly not taking that out of the equation, but I think what I got to see was a lot more of, I got to see lived out a lot more of people's thought processes behind things, which means by extension of that, I got to see a lot more of people when they're in different parts of their brains, right? I got to see brains at work, justifying things, excusing things, committing to things, not committing to things, dropping out entirely. And I got to hear a lot of the justifications and rationalizations for that, which means I think that's had a massive payoff into being a coach, which is it kind of like it's going to sound weird because it accelerates the learning process, but at the same time, I've done this for 24 years now, right? So it's been a long time, but I think that accelerated my understanding of people versus maybe a coach who gets on a call once a week with their clients and hasn't seen them in their physical lives. They've seen them like we are right now, sat in a chair, talking, and very often kind of in the process of working toward cognitively working through something, right? And I can sit here and put a big plastic smile on my face and bullshit you about all the things I'm going to do as soon as I get off this call. Yeah, straight after this, I'm going to the gym, and I can go, yeah, screw that, I'm not going to the gym, right? And you've got no continuation of our experience, of your experience of Dax Moy as soon as this call hangs up. The coach several times a week, and then seeing the physical self, experiencing the stories, the blocks, which part of the brains they're operating. And I think that's what goes a long way toward it. So, one of the things that I often recommend to coaches, even if you are not a physical coach, is to help your clients with their health, like work on their health, because even if they don't make massive inroads into it, you'll learn a lot from them about what they did and didn't do and the stories they tell themselves about. And that's why, you mentioned precision. I think that's one of the things that precision nutrition are brilliant about. They're kind of, analyzing behavior from a nutritional perspective, from a healthy lifestyle perspective, and kind of learning to break things down into smaller and smaller levels of threat and commitment.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can move into sort of the last, could be a big question, or it could be a big answer to a small question. I know that you love this stuff, geeking out on neuroscience and research and reading. And there's always new information coming out there, or maybe there's been some older research that suddenly is showing up as like, oh yes, we're actually seeing how this can be applied, or this idea, which we couldn't substantiate because maybe we didn't have the technology to see how things are firing in the brain. But is there something that you're sort of seeing right now that is in particular exciting you, or that maybe even more so is something that you're looking forward to either embracing for yourself or in your own teachings?
Yes. The short answer is yes, but it's not necessarily massive new realizations. It's the peeling the onion and going those layers of depth that are kind of building up. One of the things, even during the birth of MindMap, beliefs and values were always there. They were an extremely important part of the MindMap process. What's really surfacing for me more in the last couple of years, and I spent a lot of time on it during the first lockdown, and I just keep bringing myself back to it again and again and again, which is morality. It's the study of morality, or our perceptions of morality, right and wrong, good or bad, good and evil. Excuse me. And the reason I keep coming back to it is because what I find in a lot of instances, because people often use the whole caveman thing and the threat thing and the saber-toothed tiger thing and all of that. But most of us aren't really in true physical danger in those ways anymore, right? Our greatest physical dangers for most of us would tend to be our lifestyle choices, right? Which lead us to like obesity and cancer and heart disease and all of those kind of things, right? So they're ongoing and they're kind of insidious. But there's no, for most of us, touch wood, there aren't major physical threats in our life on a day-to-day basis. Maybe if you're a firefighter or a cop or a soldier or something like that. But for most of us, we're not facing massive physical threat. So where do most of the other threats come from? This is one of the questions I'm constantly asking myself. And obviously some of them are threats that are caused by our own feelings about things and the cognitive processes and the story layers that we build up on. So sticking with what I was saying a little while ago about going upstream, like, okay, in order to kind of feel those feelings, what must be the sponsoring emotion behind that? And where are some of those emotions being triggered from? And kind of, as you know, in MindMap, I'm constantly talking about the bulk of our threats are these days are going to be social.
Yeah.
Social threat is the biggest trigger. This is why I'm not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, tall enough, wealthy enough, right?
Or as you say, acceptance, connection, and care in this sense.
Right. Yeah. So kind of they're going to be social threat. But then that leads you to, well, what is the ultimate social threat? Like where does the ultimate social threat come from? You can absolutely, definitely be judged on your beliefs. You can be judged on how you show up in the world through your values. But there's judgment and some criticism. But what gets you demonized and dehumanized is your personal matrix, your personal recipe of morality, right? Because you may or may not share Dax Moy's personal beliefs about some things, right? You go, yeah, but I don't believe some of the stuff he believes, and I don't hold the same value hierarchy as Dax holds in those areas, but I still get on with him. He's a nice guy, and kind of I feel we can communicate. And that's all well and good, but if I've got something about my morality framework that you find offensive, and that's the key, right? Morality is very rarely neutral. It's either yeah, you're one of us, or no, you're not. Right? You if you don't, and that's why we see it in politics, we see it in gender and intersectionality and all of these different religion. We see it across there because you're either one of us or you're not.
Yeah, it's a very tribal,
Right.
almost. I don't. Ancient isn't the right word. It's been a part of human organization,
Right.
as long as we can recall.
Right. So morality for me is one of those big kind of areas that I keep popping back to and digging into and trying to get a better understanding of. And with the understanding that morality is a framework that is gifted to us from other people. It's not something we're born with. You're not born with morals. Like if we were left in our animal state and we got really hungry, we wouldn't have a social taboo not to eat the dead, for example, right? It exists because someone said not to do it. Right? And some cultures are okay with it. Some cultures, they actually eat parts of their loved ones. They take a bite out of their heart when they die, and so on and so forth. Right? So it's not a fundamental law of being human. These are social constructs, but they're extremely powerful social constructs that put us into binary right and wrong, good or bad, good or evil perspectives. And they're also the very same things that allow me to um, dehumanize you because you have a different gender or sexual identity to me, right? I go, like I absolutely hate this person because of choices they are making, right? And it's not just about me. I hate them because they are wrong, they are bad, they are evil. Dehumanization doesn't come from values. It doesn't come from general beliefs. It comes from much higher up. It comes from morality. We demonize people, dehumanize people based on morality, and so that's really socially that's our biggest threat of being outed in every sense of the word, right? But kind of being pushed out of our social groupings, being told that we're bad, and of course, when you attempt to dehumanize another person, they generally tend to turn around and dehumanize you right back. So that's where conflict really comes from.
Yeah,
So
in that
yeah,
sense,
it's a big area.
yeah, you're on the extreme ends of either polarity. I mean, this is for me my attraction over the last couple of years to the Tao Te Ching. And I'm still, I've got a ways to go because I'm still wrapping my brain around some of the ideas. I don't want to say similar, but in a similar way to what you're talking about here, is that there's such a simplicity in the way the Tao Te Ching expresses how to show up in life in a moral way without prescription. And that's very difficult for a lot of people who primarily either want to be followers and be told what to do, and that we've got a world of nearly 8 billion people. It's a really big question. Can we have a non-prescriptive morality? I mean, we don't have the time to go. I would love to have this conversation. We don't have the time to go into it here. But that requires, coming right back to an early part of our conversation, greater communing, greater connection with other people so that you can sit in discourse, so that you can allow for contention without going into extreme judgment or demonization and dehumanization like what you're talking about. And, that's whatever's happening in the world today. I feel hopeful when I see more people writing about how can we have constructive contention, because everything is so contentious into argument these days. Well, we can't go right back to, oh, kumbaya, I love you. We have to come to contention where we can sit at the same table and say, I have to walk away right now. Let's come back to this.
Yeah, one of the problems with that pathway of if we don't do something about dehumanization and demonization, we write ourselves a permission slip for destruction. right?
Yeah.
We're allowed to do or say or be anything to that other group because we no longer count them as human. They've
Mhm.
lost all their fucking rights. Like, just
Mhm.
because you voted for Trump, you're like, that's it. Like, you are a bad person. You've lost all of your rights to sit at this table, to
Yeah.
have a discussion. Your job now is to just sit here and listen to me, right? Because you voted for that party, for that person, because you believe in that variant of God, because you anything, because of who you love or whatever. Because of that, you now no longer have a voice, and that's what allows us to write the ticket for destruction. And so, I do think there is a simpler version of morality, and I think that version of morality is to focus. We already cover part of it in the MindMap program, which I'm sure you remember doing it, but maybe not necessarily kind of thinking of it in that way. But it's about your showing upwards, right? How do you? It's our decision about how we want other people to experience us, right?
So
And
mine are understanding, calm, thoughtful, and focused.
right, right. So, and mine are powerful, courageous, and compassionate, right? I want the world to experience me as powerful, as in I'm exhibiting a lot of certainty, and for me, power is really about influence. I'm trying to move things in a certain direction, right? Powerful, courageous. That means speaking from the heart what's true for me, regardless of whether it's true for you or not. I can't make decisions based upon whether it's true for you or not. I can only make it based upon myself, right? And compassionate, like understanding that we're all going through a journey, we're all experiencing some stuff, um, and understanding that what I say may not be the right message for you right now, but I'm still going to speak it. I'm not gonna wield it like a weapon. I'm gonna use it to explain something about me. And I think this is one of the challenges of morality, the way it's currently used, is people use morality to explain something about them, right? I I use my morality to tell you something about you. Like, it's the first time I'm meeting you in your life, and I'm saying, well, because you happen to be gay, or because you happen to be a Muslim, or because you happen to be a Trump supporter, or because you happen to be something, let me tell you something about you, buddy.
Yeah.
Right? That's the problem with the current model of morality. It's me defining you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the showing upwards process really is more about me defining me, but not just saying it, showing it. Like, demonstrate to the world who you are through your actions.
So perhaps morality needs to open up its field more along the lines of our emotions of safety and connection and care, and that communing, and to make that distinction between how we all want to feel in relation to each other versus a pure social construct or an ideology, because that's where we get into the binary.
Right. And but it also always comes from that singularity of how do I want to experience myself, right? How am I happy with the investment of spending the days of my life toward this thing? Like, is the return on investment high enough? Well, it's never going to feel high enough while you're going around in the world telling everybody else about how they need to measure up to a certain standard that they never signed up to and agreed to, and that they may never sign up to and agree to. Right. So what you do is you go, you know what? I'm going to show up in the world as this version of myself, not because I come from a group who say you have to, but because this is who I want to be. I want to show up in the world as this version of me. And again, that's a very iterative and intentional process of finding your value words, defining your beliefs, finding your showing up words. Right? Your showing up words are a way of saying, screw how the world wants to see me or what I think the world might want from me. What do I want to show the world? How do
Yeah.
I want to show up? And aligning with that.
It's like the classic example of the sage in many of these ancient texts. So the Tao Te Ching will talk about the sage holding the precious jade stone close to their chest, beneath their cloak. It is just old cloth. It's nothing fantastic. They walk through the village, kind of no one really pays them attention. but they have close to their heart that precious stone, which is just a metaphor for being as you've expressed, showing up in the world in the way that's, for lack of a better word, like in the best way that they can, um, but and without ideology, without preaching, without going up to anyone and saying how they should be, but generally then asking questions or offering an aphorism instead of a direct statement should they ever be approached.
Right. You know,
Yeah.
I could summarize that in: don't show up in the world telling people how they should be. Show up in the world being how you are, right? Being who you chose to be. That's it, right?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Um, I don't need to listen to you telling me that I need to be a better man or a better father or a better husband or a, like, and I need to think this way, and I need to be more inclusive or anything. Like, I will probably, like, during my lifetime, I say this, I've said this on stage before, like, during my lifetime, I've been racist, I've been sexist, I've been homophobic, I've been, misogynistic, I've been all of those things, right? Particularly in my younger self, I was brought up in a family where that was what was modeled to me, and this is how you spoke about people and how you spoke
Yeah.
to people,
Yeah.
right? Over the course of my lifetime, I've made friends with so many different people from so many different parts of life that I came to realize that the models I was using were crap, and that there's no such thing that kind of, all black people are like this, all gay people are like this, all straight people are like that, all Muslims are like this, all, like, there's no broad stroke that I can put across everyone. There's either people that treat me good, or people that don't, right? So kind of, and so this is how we start to break out of all of these models, and instead of saying that we owe each other something, right? So, like, it's more a case of, I don't owe you anything, but when I actually show up, I'm going to spend part of Dax Moy on this conversation and show you who I am, right? That's the only thing that really makes sense going through our lives. Like, going through it with this idea that I have to be something for you or you have to be something for me is just a way for us always to feel that we're in each other's debt, right? Kind of, and that just creates more and more of the problems that we've already got. We're kind of, okay, you now owe me even more because of something you said or did or a post you made 10 years ago, or, like, whatever it happens to be, right? And I think that the simplest, and I'm big on simplicity. So the simplest answer is, from a morality perspective, stop leaning into group morality and instead start leaning into solo morality, which is just another way for saying, I'm going to spend the days of my life being this person. You'll attract some, you'll repel others, many others will be indifferent to you, but the people that you do attract will be clustered groups and tribes of people that have some common ground with your view of what the planet Earth and living on it looks like. Whereas if you cling to a group morality and ideology, what you'll do is you'll just create two combating armies. You'll say, I'm in this army, and our job is to beat the living shit out of the people in the other army until they either capitulate or they're gone. Right? And I don't see that as being a kind of a winning argument.
No, not at all. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap it up. That was really wonderful. I appreciate your time, Dax. I'll put some information in the show notes, but is there a particular place where you would like people to find you?
Yeah, well, I happen to be the only Dax Moy on the planet at the moment.
Okay.
So there's only one person with that particular combination. So you can find me on Facebook or my website under the same name, Dax Moy. If you're interested in the stuff we've been speaking about here and would like to explore coaching, then mindmapcoach.com is probably the best place to go for that.
Perfect. Dax, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
That's been awesome. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Thank you.